There was a cabinet in Shelby County, Illinois, that everyone thought was full of junk. Not a toolbox, not a parts rack, a cabinet. 12 drawers of dented cigar tins, baby food jars, paper envelopes, and coffee cans, all labeled in the same narrow handwriting. 1.75 bore, 1-inch rod, high-pressure lip, old case lift arm, do not substitute. For almost 30 years, that cabinet sat against the back wall of Cal Mercer's machine shed, and men who should have known better laughed at it. They laughed because the seals were old. They laughed because some of the packages had logos from companies that had stopped making farm hydraulics before half the county was born. They laughed because Cal would spend a whole evening saving a $2 O-ring from a cylinder that everyone else would have thrown into a scrap bin. And then, in the summer of 2024, those same men started backing trucks into Cal Mercer's lane before sunrise. They came with loader cylinders in the beds. They came with grain cart cylinders strapped to flat trailers. They came with planters parked dead in the field because one rubber ring the size of a wedding band had failed. And the dealer had told them the same thing. 8 weeks, maybe 10. Price unknown until it ships. Cal Mercer was 82 years old by then. His hands shook when he buttoned his shirt, and he took his coffee with both palms around the mug. But when he picked up a hydraulic seal, the shaking stopped. He would roll it between his fingers, look at the cylinder on the bench, and say, "That one is not gone yet." Most people thought he was talking about the part. He was talking about the world that still knew how to fix it, and why a line of desperate farmers formed outside an old machine shed on a gravel road. You have to understand what Cal had been doing since 1996. That was the year his neighbor brought over a lift cylinder from a 1974 International loader. The dealer in Decatur had called it obsolete. A repair shop in Springfield had quoted a replacement assembly that cost more than the loader was worth. So the neighbor set it on Cal's bench and asked if there was any chance. Cal took it apart, measured the bore, polished the rod, dug through a shoebox of seals, and had it back together before supper. He charged $38. The neighbor said he was going to tell people. Cal said, "Don't tell too many." But rural counties do not work that way. By harvest, there were 4 dead cylinders beside Cal's south door. By the following spring, there were 15. By 2000, he had started sorting them by bore size, because the pile was beginning to look less like a favor, and more like a second occupation. Cal was not a certified dealer. He did not have a sign. He did not have a waiting room. He had a 1953 Logan lathe, a homemade seal press, a hone that sounded like a sick bee, and a habit of keeping things other men stopped noticing. His father had taught him the habit. Ed Mercer had farmed the same ground through the years, when a broken machine did not mean a new assembly. It meant a vise, a torch, a file, a measurement, and patience. Ed used to say that a farm could survive a bad crop if the shop still worked, but he could not survive a good crop sitting behind a locked parts counter. Cal heard that sentence when he was 16 and forgot the sound of it before he forgot the meaning. A hydraulic cylinder looks complicated only until someone shows you what it is. A barrel, a rod, a piston, a gland. Seals that keep pressure where pressure belongs. The steel can usually be cleaned. The rod can often be saved. The bore can be honed, if the scoring is not too deep. But the seals are the sacrifice. They take the heat, the dirt, the pressure spikes, and the years. They are designed to fail first. That was the whole trick. And by the late 1990s, Cal realized the trick had changed. The cylinders were still repairable. The men were still willing to repair them. The farm still needed them repaired. But the seals were disappearing, not all at once. That would have been easy to notice. They disappeared the way useful things usually disappear. One supplier at a time, one minimum order at a time, one discontinued line at a time. The shop in Mattoon stopped stocking the old sizes. The warehouse in Peoria sold through its domestic kits and replaced them with cheaper imports. A retired mechanic in Pana dumped 3 drawers of old Parker stock at an auction because his sons did not know what the little rings were for. Cal bought them. He bought them when the price made sense. He bought them when the price did not. He bought them from estate sales, closed shops, auction wagons, and men cleaning out garages after their knees gave out. When he found a package still stamped, "Made in USA," he did not treat it like patriotism. He treated it like evidence. Evidence that a size had existed. Evidence that a cylinder could still be saved. Evidence that somebody, somewhere, had once expected the machine to be repaired instead of replaced. By 2008, Cal had more than 5,000 individual seal components stored in that back cabinet. His son Jonah looked at the drawers one winter afternoon and said, "Dad, you know that looks insane." Cal wrote a pressure rating on a paper envelope and said, "Only if nothing ever breaks." That was the thing about Cal Mercer. He was not dramatic. He did not give speeches. He did not predict collapse. He did not tell people they would be sorry. He just watched what was going missing. And when he could afford it, he bought it before it was gone. The man who laughed the loudest was Wade Kessler. Wade owned Kessler Ag Service, a clean 8-bay shop outside Shelbyville, with a parts counter, branded shirts, 2 service trucks, and enough manufacturer plaques on the wall to make a man feel protected from uncertainty. Wade was good at his job. That matters. He was not a fool. He knew equipment. He knew customers. He had built his business from nothing, and for a long time his model was exactly right. If a cylinder failed on a newer machine, his technicians ordered the kit, rebuilt it, billed the labor, and stood behind the work. If the cylinder was too old or too damaged, they ordered a replacement assembly. Fast, clean. That was the modern way. Cal's way was slower, dirtier, harder to schedule, and impossible to scale on a spreadsheet. In 2011, at a winter farm meeting, somebody mentioned that Cal had rebuilt an old Massey loader cylinder for $45 after Kessler Ag had recommended a replacement. Wade smiled and said, "There is always a place for hobby repair." The table laughed. Then he added that half the old seals in Cal's shed were probably dried-out imports anyway. Cal was not in the room, but the sentence made its way to him before the week was over. It arrived through 3 people, losing nothing in translation, because small towns are careful with insults. Jonah expected his father to be angry. Cal only said, "He is right about some imports." Then he went back to measuring a rod. Because Cal did use imported seals. He was not a man who believed old was automatically better. If a newer seal worked in a standard pressure application, he used it. If an overseas kit held up fine in a light-duty implement, he wrote that down and ordered another. But he also wrote down the failures. He noticed which materials hardened early. He noticed which lip seals shaved under high heat. He noticed which kits fit on paper and leaked under load. He noticed which domestic seals from the 1970s still held pressure after sitting in a drawer for 20 years. The difference between Cal and Wade was not that Cal hated the new supply. The difference was that Cal never trusted any single supply to remain new forever. For years, that difference did not matter. Kessler Ag grew. Cal's cabinet grew. Farmers bought bigger equipment. Dealers pushed full assemblies. Imported parts stayed cheap, and the old repair knowledge drifted toward the edges of the county, like a fence line nobody had mowed. Then came the spring of 2024. At first, it did not look like a crisis. It looked like delay. A distributor changed its delivery window from 4 days to 2 weeks. A price list came back with certain hydraulic kits marked temporary adjustment. A shipment due in March moved to April, then May, then awaiting confirmation. The reasons were stacked on top of each other. New import penalties, freight bottlenecks, suppliers cutting volume, distributors rationing what they had left. The explanation changed depending on who answered the phone, but the result was simple. The parts were not there. By the first week of May, Kessler Ag had 17 hydraulic jobs waiting on seal kits. By Memorial Day, it had 34. By mid-June, Wade had a clipboard on his desk with names, machines, cylinder types, backorder dates, and one word written beside too many of them. Unknown. A lift cylinder kit that had cost $80 the year before was suddenly quoted at $290 when it could be found at all. A planter marker cylinder was parked for 7 weeks over a failed seal that weighed less than an ounce. One dairy farmer had a loader down and was feeding with a borrowed skid steer that burned more fuel and lifted half as much. Wade called every distributor he knew. He drove to Effingham for a box of mismatched kits that solved 3 jobs and created 4 new problems. He paid premium prices on secondary stock and passed the cost along because he had no other option. Customers were not angry at first. They were worried. Then planting windows tightened. Hay windows opened. Machines that were supposed to be earning money sat with hoses capped and rods exposed, looking like animals with broken legs. That is when a farmer named Ellis Ray turned down Cal Mercer's lane. Ellis was 41, practical, tired, and irritated in the way men get irritated when a problem is too small to explain and too large to ignore. He had a blown steering cylinder from a 1999 Case IH tractor in the back of his pickup. Kessler Ag had told him the kit was 8 to 10 weeks out, and the rebuild would likely run between $500 and $700, depending on what they could source. Ellis had heard about Cal from his uncle. He expected a shed full of clutter and a man who would maybe know a trick. He found Cal at the bench under a green metal lamp, sorting seals into a cigar tin. Cal did not ask for the story first. He asked for the cylinder. Ellis carried it in. Cal put it on the bench, wiped the gland, measured twice, and pulled the rod assembly apart with the steady annoyance of a man dealing with a problem that should not have been allowed to become mysterious. He inspected the failed seal, held it up to the light and said, "Heat got it first. Dirt finished it." Then he walked to the cabinet, not the parts counter. Not a distributor portal. Not a phone. The cabinet. He opened the fourth drawer from the top, pulled out a baby food jar, checked the label, and set 3 seals on the bench. Ellis said, "You have it?" Cal said, "I have 3. "What is the weight?" Cal looked at the cylinder. "Come back after dinner." Ellis came back at 2:30. The cylinder was rebuilt, pressure tested, and wrapped in an old seed corn towel. Cal charged him $75 in labor, plus the cost of the seals. Ellis stood there with the ticket in his hand and did not move. Kessler said 10 weeks. Cal shut the drawer. "I know what they said." By sunrise the next morning, Ellis had the tractor running. By noon, 2 more trucks had turned into Cal's lane. By the end of the week, Jonah had hung a plywood sign on the shed door that said, "Drop-offs Tuesday and Thursday. No emergency work after dark." That sign did not reduce the emergencies. It only organized them. Farmers came from Moultrie County, then Christian County, then Macon, then Fayette. A man from near Vandalia drove 2 hours with 6 cylinders chained to a trailer and a handwritten list of bore sizes, because his dealer had told him the harvest kits would not arrive before August. Cal took the list, looked at it, and said, 2 I can do. 3 I can probably do. 1 you are not going to like. The man said, "That is better than 6 I cannot do." The old cabinet became something nobody had a good word for. It was not inventory in the modern sense, because most of it could not be reordered. It was not salvage, because the pieces were unused. It was not a warehouse, because it lived inside one farmer's shed, under a ceiling fan that squeaked. It was reserve. That was the word Jonah used first, and Cal did not correct him. By July, Wade Kessler had heard Cal's name too many times to pretend it was a local curiosity. Customers would come in, ask about a back-ordered kit, hear the weight, then say, "I may try Mercer." Some said it apologetically. Some said it like a confession. Some said it like a man reaching for a rope. Wade did not blame them. That made it worse. He had built the correct business for the world that existed last year. The world had changed faster than his shelves could. The plaques on his wall did not make seals appear. The service agreements did not shorten a back order. The clean trucks, trained technicians, and modern software all depended on one invisible assumption: that the small parts would keep coming. That the small parts would keep coming. When they stopped, Wade's entire system became a beautiful, locked gate. He drove to Cal's place on a Wednesday evening, when the light had gone flat over the bean fields. He did not call first. He did not want Cal to have time to prepare a victory. There was no victory waiting. Cal was at the bench, sleeves rolled, pressing a seal into a gland, with the homemade tool his father had welded from scrap plate and an old bottle jack. Wade stepped inside and looked at the cabinet. It was larger than he remembered, or maybe he had never really looked. The drawers were numbered, the jars were sorted. The labels were not pretty, but they were exact. Bore, rod, groove, pressure, material, machine if known. And one small mark in red pencil for parts Cal considered non-replaceable. Wade put his hands in his pockets. "How long have you had this much stock?" Cal kept his eyes on the press. Depends what you mean by this much. The domestic pieces. Most since before your second shop truck. Wade absorbed that. Did you know this was coming? Cal lifted the gland, checked the seal lip, and set it on a clean rag. No. He turned toward Wade. I knew things were leaving. That was all. Wade looked at the cabinet again. In his shop, a missing kit was a purchasing problem. It was a purchasing problem. In Cal's shed, a missing kit was the final chapter of a 30-year story. Wade said, I have customers down since April. Cal nodded. Some of them have been here. I know. I was hoping we could work something out. Cal waited. Wade took a breath. I can send you the older cylinders, the odd sizes, the jobs my suppliers cannot touch. I can handle the customer side, the billing, transport if needed. You do the rebuilds. Cal wiped his hands on a towel. You are offering to send me work I already have. Wade's face tightened because it was true. Then he said the harder thing. I said something about your shop years ago. Cal said, at the winter meeting. Wade looked at him. So you did hear it. Most things get delivered eventually. I was wrong. Cal leaned back against the bench. About what part? Wade looked at the homemade press, the old lathe, the cabinet, the cylinder waiting open on the bench. About it being a hobby. For the first time that evening, Cal almost smiled. Then he said, You were not wrong about business. Replacement made sense when replacement was available. Imported kits made sense when they came every Friday. Your mistake was thinking available meant permanent. Wade did not answer. Cal picked up a red-penciled jar and turned it in his hand. My father kept seed from varieties nobody planted anymore. Men told him he was wasting cellar space. Then one wet spring, the new hybrid rotted in the low ground, and the old corn came up. He never said he was smarter. He just said a man ought to keep more than one way to get through a season. He put the jar back. Hydraulics are not different. By the fall of 2024, no one in Shelby County was laughing. The shortage did not vanish after summer. It moved into harvest. Combine header cylinders started leaking under pressure. Grain cart augers stalled halfway through unload. Lift arms drifted down overnight. A cylinder that might have waited until winter in another year became urgent because every dry day mattered. Between September and November, Cal rebuilt 146 cylinders. Jonah handled intake because Cal could no longer talk to every person who walked through the door and still get work done. He wrote job numbers on masking tape. He logged bore sizes in a spreadsheet. He photographed each failed seal before Cal threw it into a coffee can, labeled Lessons. That was Cal's name for the can. Lessons. Every bad material, every wrong substitution, every seal that failed before it should have. By Thanksgiving, farmers had come from 9 counties. The farthest had driven from across the Indiana line after a cousin sent them Cal's number on a folded fuel receipt. Cal still charged $75 labor on standard rebuilds. Jonah begged him to raise it. Cal said, a man does not become useful in a shortage and then punish people for needing him. Jonah said, your inventory is not endless. Cal looked toward the cabinet. No, that is why we better find more. That winter, they did. Not from distributors, Not from manufacturers, from forgotten rooms. A closed implement shop in Taylorville still had two metal cabinets of 1980s seal kits behind a wall of tire chains. A retired machinist outside Clinton had kept 3 milk crates of hydraulic stock because he could not bring himself to throw away parts that still had work left in them. An estate sale near Litchfield had a drawer marked rubber junk that turned out to contain enough old domestic lip seals to rebuild 30 loader cylinders. Jonah wanted to create a formal inventory system. Cal wanted a notebook. They compromised badly, which is how good farm systems are often born. Cal kept the notebook. Jonah built the spreadsheet. And Jonah's daughter Mara, who was 17 and had grown up sweeping chips from beneath the lathe, made both of them better. Mara started photographing every jar, every envelope, every part number, every handwritten note. She added condition, source, replacement risk, and probable machine family. She made a map of the cabinet on her phone, so anyone could search by bore size instead of opening 8 drawers. Cal watched her do it one Saturday morning and said, "That is faster." Mara said, "It is also backed up." Cal frowned. "Where?" She looked at him. "Not in the shed." He thought about that and nodded once. Good. By spring of 2025, the crisis had changed shape, but not disappeared. Some kits were moving again. Some prices eased. Some distributors found alternate suppliers. But the old sizes remained a problem. The odd agricultural cylinders remained a problem. The machines too useful to scrap and too old to support remained exactly where they had been all along, in the gap between modern efficiency and rural reality. That gap now led to Cal Mercer's shed. Wade Kessler sent work there openly. Not everything. His shop still handled newer machines, warranty jobs, diagnostics, and the repairs the modern system could support. But when a cylinder came in from a 1988 disc ripper with a seal size no catalog recognized, Wade no longer pretended the answer was replacement. He called Jonah. Sometimes he drove the cylinder himself. The first time he did, Mara was running the hone, while Cal stood beside her with his arms folded. Wade watched the girl adjust her pressure, check the bore, and stop the machine before Cal said a word. "She is learning fast," Wade said. Cal did not take his eyes off the work. "She is paying attention." That became the real inheritance, not the cabinet, not the lathe, not the jars. Even the domestic seals, though those mattered more than anyone had wanted to admit. The inheritance was attention, the kind that notices when a supplier stops stocking a size, the kind that writes down which part failed and why, the kind that hears a man call something obsolete and asks who benefits from that word, the kind that looks at a drawer of old seals and does not see clutter. It sees options. One evening in late October, after the worst of another harvest rush had passed, Cal sat on an overturned bucket while Mara updated the inventory on her phone. The cabinet was thinner than it had been 2 years earlier, but not empty, not close. Jonah had found the Taylorville stock. Mara had found a retired repairman in Coles County through an online farm group. Wade had started calling before shops cleaned out old inventory instead of after it went to scrap. The reserve had stopped being one man's private habit and become a county practice. Mara read out a number. Current stock supports about 200 standard rebuilds, maybe 75 odd-sized jobs, depending on what comes in. Cal said, "That is not enough." "No," she said, "but it is a start." He looked at her then, not like a grandfather looking at a child, but like a mechanic looking at a tool that had proven itself. "There is a man near Jacksonville," Cal said, "used to rebuild cylinders for highway graders. He may have glands and seals nobody has asked about in 15 years. Mara opened a new note. "What is his name?" Cal told her. The next Tuesday, 3 trucks were waiting before the shed door opened. One had a loader cylinder. One had a grain cart cylinder. One had a rusted old ram from a disc that probably should have been retired during the first Bush administration, but was still working ground because farms are full of machines that keep earning their place. Mara took the first measurements. Jonah wrote the tags, the bench, and rolled a seal between his fingers until the room went quiet enough for him to think. Outside, the gravel lane was cut with tire tracks. Inside, the old cabinet stood against the wall with its numbered drawers and imperfect labels. No longer a joke, no longer a curiosity, no longer one man's strange refusal to clean up. It had become proof. Proof that cheap is not the same as secure. Proof that efficient is not the same as resilient. Proof that an old repair can be more valuable than a new replacement when the replacement does not exist. Cal Mercer never predicted the shortage. He never claimed he had seen the future. He only noticed what everyone else had stopped keeping. And when the small parts disappeared from the system, he still had them in reach. Some men save broken things because they cannot let go of the past. Cal saved them because he understood the future has a way of needing what the present throws away.